Emily had always lived a simple life. Since childhood, she had lived in a small wooden house on the outskirts of a city that rarely saw the light of glamour or wealth. Her routine revolved around her work at the local bakery and caring for her mother, who suffered from a chronic illness. But Emily didn't mind. Happiness was found in the simple things. Her mother's smile when receiving a freshly baked loaf of bread, the scent of fresh coffee in the early morning, and the dreams she still kept in her heart. One day, as she was walking to work, she saw a man sitting in the town center park. He seemed out of place, as though he didn't belong there. His perfectly tailored suit, polished leather shoes, and distant gaze caught Emily's attention, but she didn't allow herself to look for long. It was a common sight to her, a businessman lost in thought, probably worried about some important project. She didn't have time for distractions, but something within her felt an inexplicable connection. A few days passed and she saw him again. But this time he wasn't just sitting there. He was near the bakery, watching the street traffic as though he was waiting for something. Emily, not knowing exactly what moved her, approached him to offer a fresh loaf of bread. She hesitated for a moment, looking at the man standing there, so out of place and imposing. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked in a soft but firm voice. It was a simple question, but she didn't know why she was asking it. The man looked at her for a moment, as though studying her. His blue eyes were intense and deep, and something in them stirred a curiosity in Emily. "Yes, I was just observing the city," he replied with a slightly enigmatic smile. "I'm Daniel." Emily smiled, surprised by the kindness in his tone, but didn't know how to react. After all, he seemed like someone from another world. She extended her hand with the bread, and without thinking, said something that sounded more personal than she had intended. "I'm Emily. Life here is simple, but full of life." Daniel took the bread, but his smile lingered a little longer than expected. He looked at her as if he recognized something in her that she herself didn't see. "I appreciate simple things, Emily. Often, the most valuable things are the simplest." Emily was taken aback. There was something different about Daniel, something she couldn't quite understand. Who was he, really? How could someone with that look and attire be interested in something as mundane as a fresh loaf of bread from a bakery? The answer to her questions would come faster than she imagined. But for now, Emily had no idea that this encounter would change her life forever. The following week, Emily couldn't shake off the memory of the brief encounter with Daniel. His words lingered in her mind, and she found herself thinking about him more than she cared to admit. It wasn't just his striking appearance or his wealth that stood out to her, but something deeper. Something in his eyes that seemed to carry a weight she couldn't quite understand. She saw him again the next morning, as she was setting up the bakery for the early rush. The streets were still quiet, and the sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft golden glow on the city. He was standing by the window of the cafe next door, looking out at the street, lost in thought. Emily hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and decided to approach him again. "Good morning, Daniel," she said, trying to sound casual as she walked towards him. He turned to face her, his eyes lighting up with recognition. "Good morning, Emily. I didn't expect to see you so early." "I could say the same," Emily replied with a smile. "Are you always up this early?" Daniel chuckled, but there was a subtle sadness in his laugh. "I wish I could say it's for something important, but it's just the way things are sometimes." Emily felt the curiosity growing inside her. She wanted to know more, to understand why he seemed so distant, yet so drawn to this simple life. But there was an unspoken barrier, a wall between them that Emily couldn't quite cross. She knew he wasn't just another businessman. There was more to him than met the eye. "You know," she said cautiously, "sometimes the simplest things can make the biggest difference." Daniel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Emily glanced around, as though checking if anyone was listening, and then leaned in slightly. "I mean, life here, this bakery, the people around here, we're not chasing after wealth or status. We just live, and maybe that's what makes it special." There was a long pause before Daniel spoke again. "I've spent most of my life chasing success, Emily. but I've never found anything that compares to what you're describing." Emily didn't know how to respond. She had always thought of her life as ordinary, simple, and perhaps a little bit insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But hearing Daniel's words, she felt a flicker of something that made her wonder if there was more to this encounter than mere coincidence. "You know," Emily began, shifting the conversation, "I'm always here if you ever need a quiet place to think." Daniel smiled warmly, and for the first time his expression seemed genuine. "I appreciate that, Emily. Perhaps I'll take you up on that offer one day." As he walked away, Emily couldn't help but feel that something significant was beginning to unfold. She didn't know what it was yet, but she felt a stirring in her heart, a sense of anticipation for something she couldn't quite define. Little did she know, the man standing before her wasn't just any stranger. He was someone who would change the course of her life forever. But the true nature of Daniel's story was something Emily could never have imagined, no matter how much she tried. A few days passed since their last meeting, and Emily found herself distracted more than ever. Her routine at the bakery remained the same, kneading dough, baking bread, greeting the regular customers, but her thoughts were often interrupted by memories of Daniel. She couldn't quite understand why she felt such a strong pull toward him, especially given how little she knew about his life. One evening, after closing the bakery, Emily was walking home when she saw him again. Daniel was standing by the city fountain, staring at the water as if lost in thought. The soft glow of the streetlights reflected off the surface, casting a golden hue around him. For a moment, he seemed almost otherworldly, as if he belonged in a different time and place altogether. Emily hesitated, then decided to approach him. This time there was a sense of familiarity between them, like two people who had shared something important, even if they hadn't yet realized it. "Daniel," she called out, her voice soft in the quiet night. He turned, his eyes lighting up with a smile when he saw her. "Emily, it's good to see you again." "I didn't expect to find you out here," she said, glancing around the empty streets. "Is everything okay?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I'm just thinking," he said, his voice tinged with something deeper. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a world that's too fast, too driven by things that don't really matter. I just needed to escape for a bit." Emily studied him carefully. There was something in his words that resonated with her, something that made her feel as though he was speaking a truth she hadn't yet understood. "You know," Emily said, choosing her words carefully, "I think a lot of people are just running through life, chasing things they think will make them happy. But the truth is, happiness isn't about what we have or what we achieve. It's about the moments we share, the connections we make." Daniel looked at her, his eyes narrowing as if he was seeing her in a new light. "You make it sound so simple," he said, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Emily shrugged. "Sometimes the simplest things are the most important." There was a long pause before Daniel spoke again. "I've been hiding something from you, Emily," he said quietly, his voice suddenly serious. "Something I think you deserve to know." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but something in her gut told her it was about to get much deeper than she anticipated. Daniel hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I'm not who I've been pretending to be. I'm not just a businessman. My life is far more complicated than that." Emily raised an eyebrow, confused. "What do you mean?" Daniel looked away, his gaze fixed on the flowing water. "I come from a family with a great deal of wealth, and I've been groomed to take over the family business, but I hate it. I hate the world that comes with it, the power, the control, the constant pressure to succeed. It's all just a game." Emily was stunned. She had never imagined that someone like Daniel, who seemed so down to earth, could be hiding such a life. The idea of him coming from a wealthy family, living a life so different from hers, felt like a shock to her system. "I've been pretending to be someone I'm not," Daniel continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to escape that life, to find something real. And when I met you, Emily, I thought maybe I had found it." Emily didn't know what to say. Her heart was racing, and she could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had never expected this, never imagined that the man she had been drawn to was carrying such a heavy burden. "I don't know what to do anymore," Daniel confessed, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm trapped in a life that's not mine, and I don't know how to break free." Emily took a step closer to him, her heart aching for him. She had always believed that everyone deserved a chance at happiness, but she never realized how much Daniel was struggling beneath the surface. "You don't have to face it alone," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "I don't know what you're going through, but if you need someone to talk to, someone to help you figure it out, I'm here." Daniel looked at her, his eyes full of emotion. For the first time since they had met, Emily saw the vulnerability in him, something he had kept hidden behind his wealth and stature. "Thank you, Emily," he said, his voice raw with gratitude. "You have no idea how much that means to me." In that moment, Emily realized that this wasn't just some fleeting connection. It was the beginning of something much deeper. She didn't know where it would lead, but she was certain of one thing: she couldn't turn back now. The days following their conversation by the fountain were filled with a quiet, uneasy tension. Emily continued with her daily routine at the bakery, but her thoughts were no longer just about the dough and the customers. They were consumed with Daniel, the man who had shared the truth of his life, a life that seemed so distant from hers yet somehow pulled her in. Emily couldn't help but feel a growing connection to him, but at the same time, the reality of his situation loomed over her. He was trapped in a world of wealth and expectation, and the more she learned about his struggles, the more she wondered if she could truly help him. It was a crisp autumn evening when Daniel asked Emily to meet him again. He had texted her earlier that day, asking if she could meet him at the cafe down the street. Emily agreed, though she had no idea what to expect. When she arrived, she found Daniel sitting at a table by the window, looking out at the busy street as people hurried past. The warm glow of the cafe lights cast a soft light on his face, and for a moment, he seemed like someone who didn't belong in this world, someone lost between two realities. "Hey," Emily said softly, as she sat down across from him. He looked up at her with a tired smile. "Hey, Emily, thanks for coming." She studied him closely. His usual polished appearance was gone, replaced by a look of weariness that made her heart ache. It was clear that the weight of his secrets had begun to take a toll on him. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. Daniel took a deep breath before speaking. "I don't know, Emily. I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about my life, about what I really want. And I've realized something important. I can't keep pretending. I can't keep living in this bubble of wealth and expectation." Emily nodded, unsure of what to say. She had seen the struggle in his eyes, the way he grappled with the life that had been handed to him. She understood that desire for freedom, for something more genuine than the facade he had built. "I know it's not going to be easy," Daniel continued, his voice low. "I've spent years building this life, this business, this image, but I don't want it anymore. I don't want to be the person everyone expects me to be. I want to find myself again. I want to live a life that matters." Emily reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it spoke volumes. "Then you have to make a choice, Daniel," she said softly. "You have to decide if you're going to keep living for other people, or if you're going to live for yourself." He looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what if I fail? What if I lose everything?" Emily squeezed his hand, offering him a reassuring smile. "Maybe you won't lose everything. Maybe what you think you'll lose isn't what truly matters. What if you gain something better instead?" Daniel was silent for a moment, contemplating her words. He had spent so much of his life living up to other people's expectations. His family, his business partners, the world that demanded perfection from him. But Emily's words struck a chord in him. Could he really walk away from it all? Could he let go of the life that had been dictated to him and forge his own path? "I've always been afraid of the unknown," Daniel confessed. "I've spent my whole life making calculated decisions, always looking for the safest route. But now I'm not sure what to do." Emily smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. It's okay to be afraid, but sometimes the unknown is where the most important changes happen. You have to take a leap, Daniel. Trust that everything you need will come when you follow your heart. Daniel looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and hesitation in his eyes. He had been searching for meaning in his life, but he hadn't expected to find it here, sitting across from a woman who lived a world away from his. Yet somehow, Emily had become his anchor, the one person who made him believe that a different life was possible. "I don't know if I'm ready," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to be willing to try." There was a long pause before Daniel spoke again. "What if I fail?" Emily smiled gently. "Then you try again, and again, until you get it right." For the first time since they'd met, Daniel felt a sense of peace settle over him. The weight of his decisions didn't feel as heavy anymore. Emily had given him something invaluable: hope. The hope that he could change, that he could live for himself and not for the expectations of others. As they sat there, quietly sharing a moment of understanding, Daniel realized something profound. His life, though uncertain and filled with obstacles, was his own to shape. And with Emily by his side, he wasn't alone anymore. The next few days felt like a whirlwind to Emily and Daniel. They were both in uncharted territory. Him on the brink of stepping away from the life he had known for so long, and her as someone who had never imagined her world would intertwine so deeply with someone so different from her. Despite their differences, something between them was undeniably real. Daniel began to make plans. He started taking active steps toward changing his life, albeit slowly. The family business was no longer his first priority, and the pressure to live up to his family's expectations began to fade. Emily, though quietly uncertain about the future, stood by him through every decision, supporting him without question. One evening, as autumn's golden hues bled into the cool evening sky, Daniel invited Emily to join him for dinner. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a significant moment, one where the man who had once been lost in a world of wealth and power was stepping into a new version of himself. "I'm not sure how this is going to go," Daniel said as they sat down at a cozy table in a local restaurant. "But I know that I need to do this for myself, and for the first time in a long time I feel like I'm actually living my life, not someone else's." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with pride for him. "You're doing it, Daniel. You're making the changes you've been dreaming about for so long, and it's only just beginning." He looked at her, his expression softening. "I never thought I'd find someone like you, Emily. You make me want to be better, to be the person I've always been afraid to be. You make me believe that I'm worthy of something real." She reached out and gently placed her hand on his. "You always were worthy of it," she replied softly. "It just took you a while to realize that." As they talked, the weight of his past life seemed to lift with each word. He had always felt trapped by the expectations of his family, by the obligations of his wealth. Now, for the first time, he was making decisions based on his own heart, his own desires, rather than what others expected from him. He was slowly learning to live authentically, free from the shackles of his previous world. Later that evening, as they walked back through the city streets, Daniel stopped in front of a small bookstore that caught his eye. The warm light spilling from the shop's window illuminated rows of books, their spines promising new worlds, new ideas. Something about the scene felt symbolic of his journey. "I used to avoid places like this," Daniel said, his eyes scanning the window. "I was always too busy, too focused on things that didn't really matter." Emily smiled, noticing the change in his tone. "It's funny how much the small things can make a difference, right?" "Yeah," Daniel replied, turning to her with a thoughtful expression. "I've realized that all those things I was chasing, they never brought me happiness. They just made me feel empty." They stood there for a while in comfortable silence, taking in the quiet beauty of the night, the sounds of the city around them. Carriages, laughter, the distant hum of conversation seemed to echo the change unfolding in Daniel's life. "I never thought I'd find peace," Daniel said after a moment. "I thought I was too far gone, too deep in my old world. But being with you, Emily, I feel like I'm finally waking up. I don't have all the answers, but I know I'm on the right path." Emily's heart fluttered at his words. She had always believed in the idea of second chances, in the idea that people could change and grow. But to witness it firsthand, in someone like Daniel, was more than she could have hoped for. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "And I believe in you, Daniel." He smiled, his eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, something more vulnerable than she had ever seen before. "Thank you, Emily. You've made all the difference in my life." As they continued walking, the city felt different to Daniel. It wasn't just a place where he had once felt trapped. Now it was a canvas, a place where he could build something new, something real. That night, as they parted ways, Daniel felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in years. He knew there was still much work ahead, his family, the business, his past. But for the first time, he didn't feel alone in his journey. With Emily by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. As the weeks passed, Daniel found himself walking a fine line between his old world and his new life. The weight of his family's expectations had not fully lifted, and though he had distanced himself from the business, he still felt the pressure from his past looming over him. He was trying to build a future based on his own desires, but it wasn't as easy as he had hoped. Emily, on the other hand, was flourishing in her own way. The bakery was doing better than ever. Her simple yet warm demeanor attracted more customers, and she could see the community around her beginning to appreciate the value of the work she had always loved. Despite the contrast in their lives, Emily and Daniel had found common ground, a shared understanding of wanting more from life than what the world had expected of them. But there were still moments when Daniel would retreat into his own thoughts, troubled by the past he was trying so hard to escape. He was no longer the businessman his family expected him to be, but his past continued to haunt him, like a shadow he couldn't outrun. One evening, as the two of them sat on a park bench watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Daniel spoke up. "I never thought leaving my family's world would be this hard. I thought once I walked away, I'd be free. But there's always something pulling me back." Emily turned to him, sensing the sorrow in his voice. "What's pulling you back?" Daniel let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his hair. "My family. They don't understand. They think I'm throwing everything away. The business, the legacy, it's all supposed to be mine. And I was supposed to take it over. But it's not what I want. They don't get that. And now I'm caught between living for them and living for myself." Emily's heart ached as she listened to him. She could see how torn he was, how the pull of duty and family loyalty conflicted with his desire to break free. "You've been living for them your whole life, Daniel. Maybe it's time to stop trying to please them. They may never understand, but that doesn't mean you should sacrifice your happiness for them." Daniel stared ahead at the setting sun, as if searching for answers in the vast sky. "I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I could just walk away and start fresh, but I didn't realize how much of my identity was tied to that life, how much of it I had accepted as my own." "You're not that man anymore," Emily said, her voice soft but firm. "You're not defined by your family's expectations. You're defined by the choices you make now. You don't have to carry that burden anymore." He turned to her, his eyes searching hers for something, for reassurance. "But what if it's too late? What if I've already made too many mistakes?" Emily reached out and took his hand in hers, grounding him in that moment. "It's never too late. You can't change the past, but you can change what comes next. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, Daniel. Let go of what doesn't serve you. Trust that the right path will reveal itself." Daniel's eyes softened, a flicker of hope igniting in his heart. "I wish I could be as sure as you are." Emily smiled gently. "You don't have to be sure of everything. You just have to take the next step, and I'll be here to walk beside you." The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with the understanding that they had reached a deeper level of connection. They didn't need to have all the answers. They just needed each other to face the unknown ahead. As the night crept in, they walked side by side, not speaking, but knowing that this moment was significant. Daniel's past was still a weight he carried, but for the first time, he was starting to believe that he didn't have to carry it alone. With Emily by his side, he felt the possibility of a future where he could be free from the chains of his family's expectations. A future where he could be himself. Daniel's life was becoming a delicate balance. Each day felt like a new decision that could tip him in one direction or another. On one side, the life he had been born into, a life of wealth, power, and legacy, was still pulling at him, no matter how much he tried to let it go. On the other side, there was Emily, the simple, grounded woman who had shown him that happiness didn't come from material things, but from connection, authenticity, and living in the moment. As the weeks went by, the tension between these two worlds became harder to ignore. His family had begun to call more frequently, insisting that he come to meetings, join family dinners, and take part in decisions about the future of the business. At the same time, Emily had started to encourage him to focus on his passions, to explore what he truly wanted to do with his life, beyond the wealth and expectations that had once defined him. It was on a quiet Thursday evening that Daniel received a call that would change everything. "Daniel, it's time. The family needs you." His father's voice boomed through the phone, his tone commanding and full of authority. "We've been waiting for you to step up. The company is on the verge of something big, and we need you here. We need you to take your place as the heir. You can't keep hiding from your responsibilities." The words were like a punch to his gut. Daniel had expected this. His father had always made it clear that his future was already written, but hearing it again, so bluntly, brought back all the doubts and fears he had been trying to push away. "I've told you, I'm not interested in the business anymore," Daniel replied, his voice firm but tired. "I'm not the person you think I am. I'm trying to build my own path, one that makes sense to me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You don't understand, Daniel. You were born to do this. You have a responsibility to your family, to the legacy we've built. You can't just walk away from it all." "I'm not walking away," Daniel said, feeling the weight of his own words. "I'm choosing something different." "Then you're choosing to throw everything away. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost." The call ended abruptly, and Daniel stood there, staring at his phone, feeling the familiar anxiety creep in. He was torn between two worlds, the life that had been laid out for him and the life he was trying to build with Emily. Both worlds called to him, but he knew deep down that if he returned to the business, it would be a betrayal of everything he had worked for. That night, as he sat in his apartment, the silence was deafening. The walls, once so familiar, now felt like a cage. His mind raced with the conversation he'd just had with his father. He could almost hear the echoes of his family's judgment, the pressure to conform to their expectations. Emily had noticed the change in him the moment they met the next day. His face was pale, and the usual confidence that had started to bloom in him had faded. She could see the internal struggle written all over him. "Daniel, what's going on?" Emily asked gently, placing her hand on his arm as they sat at the small table in the bakery. He sighed heavily. "My father called. They want me back in the business. They think it's time for me to take over. They don't understand that I can't do it. I don't want that life anymore." Emily could see the pain in his eyes, the conflict that was tearing him apart. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly, her voice filled with concern. "I don't know," Daniel replied, running a hand through his hair. "I feel like I'm at a crossroads. If I stay away, I'm turning my back on my family. If I go back, I'm betraying everything I've worked for in these past months. I don't know what's right anymore." Emily leaned in, her eyes filled with compassion. "You've already made the hardest decision, Daniel. You've chosen to live for yourself. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Your family may never understand, but that doesn't mean you have to live by their rules. You have to choose what's right for you." Daniel's chest tightened as he looked at her, feeling a rush of gratitude and love for the woman who had been his anchor through all of this. "I don't know if I can do this alone," he whispered. "You're not alone," Emily said, squeezing his hand. "I'm here, and I believe in you." Her words brought a sense of clarity to Daniel, a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in days. He knew Emily was right. He had already taken the hardest step by breaking away from the life his family had planned for him. Now he had to trust himself to follow through. The decision was no longer about whether he would return to the business or not. It was about whether he would continue to live for others or take control of his own destiny. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't let fear or obligation dictate his life any longer. Later that day, Daniel made the call. He called his father and told him that he was done with the business for good. The legacy his family had built was not his to carry. He was no longer bound by their expectations. As he hung up the phone, Daniel felt a wave of relief wash over him. The weight he had been carrying for so long had finally lifted. The path ahead wasn't easy, but for the first time he felt free to walk it. With Emily by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, he was at peace with the choice he had made. The days following Daniel's decision were filled with a strange mix of freedom and fear. He had taken the leap, severing ties with the world that had defined him for so long, but with each step forward, there was a constant reminder of how much he had left behind. The business, the family legacy, the wealth, it was all still there, just out of reach, tempting him to look back. But Daniel was resolute. He knew that the life he was building with Emily was more important than any material success his family could offer. It wasn't long before the ripple effects of his decision began to surface. His family tried to reach out, his father sending letters, his mother calling in tears, but Daniel didn't respond. For the first time, he realized that he had been living his life in reaction to their expectations, not in pursuit of his own happiness. Despite the emotional turmoil, Daniel started to feel a sense of peace settle within him. He woke up every day with a new purpose, no longer motivated by fear or obligation, but by the desire to create something meaningful, something that was his own. Emily was there every step of the way, offering her unwavering support. She had always believed in him, even when he couldn't believe in himself. One evening, as they sat together in the small apartment Daniel had rented, far from the luxury of his old life, he turned to Emily, his face serious yet filled with a soft, genuine smile. "You've changed everything for me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me the courage to choose myself, to stop hiding." Emily's eyes softened, and she reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "You always had the courage, Daniel. You just needed someone to remind you of it." Daniel took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "I don't know where this path is going, but I know one thing for sure. I'm not walking it alone. I want to do something with my life that actually matters, something that gives back. I can't undo the past, but I can build a future that's mine. That's ours." Emily smiled warmly, her heart swelling with love for him. "Whatever that future looks like, I'm with you. I always will be." Over the next few months, Daniel began to carve out a new life for himself. He wasn't entirely sure what he wanted to do yet, but he knew it had to involve helping others. The wealth and success he had once chased seemed so hollow now. What mattered more was the idea of creating something meaningful, something that would impact people in a positive way. He started volunteering at local organizations, working with underprivileged communities, using his skills in business to help them grow. It was a far cry from the corporate world he had once inhabited, but it was fulfilling in a way that nothing in his past had ever been. Emily, too, was flourishing. She continued to run her bakery, but now she had a new sense of purpose. The bakery became more than just a business. It became a community hub. She started offering free meals to those who were struggling, creating a space where people could come together, share stories, and find comfort in the simple act of sharing a meal. Together, they began to build a life that was rooted in authenticity and purpose. Their worlds were still worlds apart in many ways. Daniel's past with its wealth and influence, Emily's present as a small-town baker, but they found that their differences only made them stronger. They complemented each other in ways they hadn't imagined. Where Daniel brought vision and ambition, Emily brought warmth and grounding. Together, they created a partnership that was unshakable. One day, as they sat together at the park, watching the children run around and play, Daniel turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I used to think that success meant having everything I wanted. money, power, recognition. But now, I realize that the real success is in the way we live our lives. It's in the connections we make, the impact we have on others. Emily looked at him, her heart full of love and admiration. You're right. And look at what we've built together. It's more than I ever imagined. Daniel nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. I'm starting to believe that maybe this is what I was meant to do all along. Help people. Be a part of something bigger than myself. As they walked back to their apartment that evening, hand in hand, Daniel felt a profound sense of contentment wash over him. He had let go of the life that had been expected of him, and in doing so, he had found a life that was more fulfilling than he could have ever dreamed. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was truly living. In the distance, the city skyline stood tall, but for Daniel, it no longer symbolized the world he had left behind. Now it was just another backdrop to the life he was building, one full of possibility, love, and purpose. And with Emily by his side, he knew that no matter where the road took him, he had everything he needed. As Daniel and Emily continued their journey of transformation, their lives began to take on a new rhythm. The once chaotic, uncertain days were now filled with purpose and meaning. They had found something that most people spend their entire lives searching for: happiness, not through material wealth or societal approval, but through genuine connection and giving back to the world around them. However, their newfound peace was about to be challenged in ways they had not anticipated. One autumn morning, Daniel received an unexpected phone call. It was from a law firm representing his family. His father, growing increasingly frustrated with Daniel's decision to walk away from the business, had decided to take legal action to ensure Daniel would return to his position as the heir. The family business, which had been passed down for generations, was at risk, and Daniel's refusal to assume his place in it was threatening the stability of their empire. Daniel, the lawyer's voice was cold and professional, your father is insisting that you take up your role in the company. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to take this matter to court. Your refusal is causing a significant disruption to the business, and he feels that you are undermining everything your family has built. Daniel felt his heart drop into his stomach. The words felt like a betrayal, a reminder of the world he was trying to escape. His first instinct was to hang up, to reject the pressure once again. But as he listened to the lawyer's steady voice, he realized this wasn't just a simple request. This was a threat. The business was his birthright, and it seemed that his family would stop at nothing to reclaim it. He hung up the phone, his mind spinning. The weight of his past life came crashing back in a rush. Could he really walk away from everything his family had built? Was he strong enough to face them, and to face his own fear of losing everything again? Later that evening, as he sat in their small apartment, Emily could see the torment in his eyes. She had always known that Daniel's struggle wasn't just about the money. It was about his identity, his family, and the pressure to be someone he wasn't. What happened? She asked, sitting beside him. They're taking me to court, Daniel replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. My father won't let go. He's using the business as leverage, and now he's threatening to sue me if I don't return. Emily's heart sank. She had known the path Daniel had chosen wasn't easy, but hearing this news made her realize just how much he was up against. Daniel, she said, her voice steady but filled with concern. This is exactly what you've been trying to escape. They're not just trying to control the business, they're trying to control your life. You've made so much progress. Don't let them take that away from you. Daniel looked at her, his eyes filled with pain and confusion. But what if I lose everything, Emily? The court case, the business. What if I'm left with nothing? Emily took his hand, squeezing it gently. You have nothing to fear. You've already built something real here. Your life, your happiness. It's not in that business. It's with the people you help, the difference you're making. No court case can take that away from you. Her words hit him like a revelation. Emily was right. His life, his future, had never been about the business or the wealth his family offered. It was about the choices he had made, the path he had forged with his own hands. This fight, whether in a courtroom or with his family, was not about money. It was about his right to live on his own terms. The next day, Daniel made a decision. He called his lawyer and informed him that he would fight. He would not return to the family business, not because he didn't care about his family, but because he had learned that living for others was no longer his reality. The court battle would be long and grueling, but Daniel felt ready. He was no longer the young man who had run from his fears. He was a man who had faced them head-on and come out stronger. Over the next few weeks, the court case became the focal point of their lives. Daniel pored over legal documents, met with his attorney, and prepared for the battle that would test his resolve. But through it all, Emily remained his unwavering support. She was by his side, not just as his partner, but as the person who had helped him rediscover his strength. As the trial date approached, Daniel's anxiety began to build. He knew this was more than just a legal battle. It was a fight for his future, his identity, and the life he had built with Emily. But with every passing day, he felt more confident in his decision. The courtroom was a cold and impersonal place, but as Daniel walked in, side by side with Emily, he realized something profound. The stakes were high, but the true test of his character wasn't going to be decided by a judge or jury. It was going to be decided by the choices he made in this moment. And for the first time, he knew he was ready to face whatever came next. The case was long and complex, with his family throwing everything they had at him. But Daniel stood firm, his resolve unwavering. In the end, the judge ruled in his favor. The family business would not control his life. It was a hard-won victory. But Daniel had won something far more important than the court case. He had won his freedom. The dust had finally settled. After weeks of tension, emotional turmoil, and a long, drawn-out legal battle, Daniel emerged victorious. The court ruling had solidified his right to walk away from the family business, and though his victory was hard-earned, it felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The finality of the ruling allowed him to breathe deeply, to release the hold that his past had on him. But the victory wasn't just about the business. It was about the man he had become throughout the struggle. He had fought for his life, his happiness, and his right to live authentically. And in doing so, he had discovered a version of himself that was stronger, braver, and more resilient than he ever thought possible. In the days following the trial, Daniel and Emily took some time to reflect, to let the whirlwind of emotions settle. Daniel was exhausted, but there was a sense of peace within him. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking over his shoulder at his past. He was focused on the future he and Emily would build together. One crisp morning, a week after the ruling, Daniel and Emily sat together on the small balcony of their apartment. The city sprawled below them, the early morning sunlight casting long shadows on the streets. For a moment, they just sat in silence, enjoying the calm, a stark contrast to the storm that had engulfed them just a few days ago. "I can't believe it's finally over," Daniel said, his voice soft but filled with relief. He took a deep breath, as if grounding himself in the present. "I feel like I can finally exhale." Emily smiled, her hand resting on his. "You fought for yourself, Daniel, and you won. It was never about the business or the money. It was about claiming your life back." Daniel nodded, the truth of her words sinking in. "I always thought that success meant having everything, but now I see that real success is about living your truth, and I've got that now. I've got you." Emily's heart swelled with love. "We've got each other, Daniel, and that's everything." They sat in companionable silence for a while longer, taking in the beauty of the world around them. In that moment, Daniel realized something profound. The victory he had fought for wasn't just about the court case, the money, or the legacy. It was about the freedom to live the life he had always wanted, a life filled with love, authenticity, and the kind of success that couldn't be measured in dollars and titles. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel and Emily continued to explore their new life together. They focused on the work that truly mattered to them, helping others, creating a meaningful future, and finding joy in the simple things. Daniel started his own nonprofit organization, using his skills and resources to provide opportunities for people who were struggling to break free from the systems that held them back. It wasn't the kind of work that made headlines or garnered fame, but it was the kind of work that made a difference. one person at a time. Emily's bakery continued to thrive as well, but it became more than just a business. It was a community space, a place where people could gather, share stories, and find comfort in each other's company. They started hosting free workshops, cooking classes, and events that brought people together, creating a sense of belonging that had been missing in the neighborhood. Daniel and Emily had found their place in the world. Together, they had built something real, something that was theirs. And while there would always be challenges, Daniel knew he had the strength to face them, because he no longer felt the weight of his past bearing down on him. His family's expectations, the business he had inherited, and the wealth that had once defined his life, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the love they shared and the impact they were making in the world. One afternoon, as they sat in their cozy living room, sipping tea and talking about their future, Daniel looked at Emily with a quiet smile. "I never thought I'd get here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But now that I'm here, I can't imagine ever going back." Emily took his hand, her gaze filled with love and understanding. "You never had to go back. You were always meant to be here with me. And now, we get to build something that truly matters." As they sat there, in the quiet of their new life, Daniel knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, yes, but it would also be filled with possibility. They had both chosen a path that was theirs to walk, and no matter where it took them, Daniel knew one thing for certain. The life they had built together was the most real and valuable thing he could ever hope for. And as he looked at Emily, he knew that he had found the one thing that made all the difference, the kind of love that could turn a new beginning into an everlasting journey.